Good afternoon to you. 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Is the jig up for Joe Biden? Have the Democrats had enough of his malarkey? The details ahead on that and some educated speculation. Also coming up, Russ Vought will be with us this hour at 4:30 from the Center for Renewing America, former OMB Director under President Trump. We'll talk about the possibility of another government shutdown. I don't think most people are worried about that subject, but will we get actual clean spending bills passed? And are we going to be able to get this government under control in any capacity? Russ Vought will help us navigate that. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Keeping track of all of the developing Biden news today. Also, we've got some news about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her criminality coming up, and that'll all be contained in my conversation with my next guest, Andrew Kerr. He's an investigative reporter for the Washington Free Beacon and joins us now. Andrew, good to have you with us today, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me back on, Vince.
Andrew, I was just talking about all of these felony gun charges that Hunter Biden has now been indicted with by the special counsel, David Weiss. This has been a very bizarre saga that has been characterized by an effort clearly to allow Hunter Biden to walk completely away from all of this with just a completely blank slate. But it's led ultimately to this moment, all of that drama, where we have these three charges now. What do you make of all of it?
Yeah, I mean, this thing was, pretty much locked up for Hunter just back in June. He had this sweetheart plea deal that granted him broad immunity for his tax and foreign business dealings issues. But, this whole thing blew up for him at this July hearing where the judge was like, this is pretty bizarre. This is saying that the government can't charge you for anything mentioned in this agreement. And there's stuff here about like his issues that could pertain to foreign agent registration and a wide swath of tax years. So now Hunter has been indicted with the gun charges, three felony charges, and what's next is the question is whether David Weiss will levy tax charges for Hunter Biden. The documents in the cases a month or so ago showed that he failed to pay up to $1.5 million in taxes. So we're expecting to see whether Weiss files charges in California or in D.C. federal court, the jurisdictions where those alleged crimes took place. So that's the next step here. And it's worth noting that with the gun crimes, and I believe that former President Trump noted this on Truth Social about an hour ago, but this is really the only alleged crime that Hunter committed that does not involve Joe Biden. So it is noteworthy that this is that they're going aggressively against Hunter for this. But the real question is the tax crimes and the allegations of self-dealing and the foreign business dealings.
Wait, but let me pause on that point for a moment, because I was just making an extensive argument over the last hour that I don't think that that's true. I heard James Comer say that. I heard Donald Trump say that too. And I think that it is wrong to conclude that Joe Biden is distant from this issue because of the Secret Service's involvement in the gun case, where there are allegations, which I know you have reported on, of the Secret Service being involved in trying to take custody of the paperwork from Hunter Biden's gun purchase. That's a very strange thing to occur in 2018 after neither Joe nor Hunter have any Secret Service protection. The Secret Service is inserting themselves. So that questions around that incident remain completely unanswered, don't they?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And shame on me for not mentioning that. Yeah, I think you're right. Politico reported years ago that the Secret Service had involved themselves in this case, and the Secret Service has denied any involvement. But you're right; those questions remain out there, and it seems plausible that depending on what facts come forward, that maybe there could have been some involvement from Joe Biden here.
Yes. And in fact, I'm looking at an old report from you and Jerry Dunleavy when you were writing for the Washington Examiner. You point out that Hunter Biden had berated his sister-in-law, Haley Biden, accused her of ruining his life after he learned that she had thrown this gun in the trash near a Delaware high school in October of 2018, according to texts that you obtained, Andrew Kerr, from a copy of Hunter's abandoned laptop. You say that the text messages also show that the Secret Service was involved, according to texts from Hunter. So this is even Hunter Biden saying that the Secret Service was involved.
Yes, according to text on the
laptop. Yes,
right, and reported by Politico.
Amazing. It's just amazing. And one other piece on that laptop, which I know you've done so much reporting on. Somebody, a listener, sent me a photo from Hunter Biden's laptop of a separate image of Hunter, a naked Hunter Biden, unfortunately, holding a semi-automatic pistol in his hand. And it's down kind of by his leg. That is a different gun than the one in question today, because what we're talking about, the charges were brought for Hunter buying and possessing a .38 Special Cobra revolver. That is a different gun than the one that Hunter Biden is holding in pictures seen on his laptop. In other words, there are other occasions that the feds could potentially charge here, unless, of course, the statute of limitations ran out.
Correct. Yeah, that second gun has always been a bit of a mystery. That why not much talk about that, but you're correct. That's the second gun that around this time frame. And just to go back to the Secret Service involvement, what Hunter said in this text message, he said that Hallie Biden, she stole the gun out of his car, threw it in a garbage can next to at a grocery store next to a high school. And they said, quote, when the police, the FBI, the Secret Service came on the scene, she said she took it from me because she was scared I would harm myself due to my drug and alcohol problem and for a volatile relationship. And that she was afraid for the kids. So, yeah Hunter had this absolute meltdown when Hallie Biden took his gun, and because she said that she was scared. Hunter had a romantic relationship with her, even though she is his sister-in-law, and so Hunter is claiming there that there was some sort of Secret Service involvement. So, I guess we'll see. Maybe those answers will finally come out. Kind of resolve that. The Secret Service, again, they say that we had no involvement, no records of involvement. So
yes,
there's a bit of a contradiction there.
Right. Yeah, and there was some confusion. There was kind of panic within the Secret Service when this Politico report came out, because Judicial Watch eventually obtained documents that showed a bunch of Secret Service officials emailing around trying to figure out who was involved here, what Secret Service agents were there, whether or not somebody was freelancing in their off hours. So a lot of questions to be answered yet. Let's talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez now, Andrew Kerr, because I know you've got some reporting on this subject, and I didn't realize this was even up for debate, but there's some question of whether or not AOC is actually married. There's a dispute about this. What's happening?
Yeah, this is a particularly bizarre story, but AOC has claimed in 4 disclosures, legal filings with the House Ethics Committee that so far this year, that she has a spouse by the name of Riley Roberts. And the way that these forms are organized is that she has the option to check spouse, child, or other. So she could have described him as a fiancé, which is what the public has been led to believe that is the status of the relationship. But she's saying over and over again that this guy is my spouse.
Yes.
So why this matters is that congressional spouses their finances are subject to public disclosure. And AOC's most recent financial disclosure submitted just last month, even though she makes 2 references to her spouse in that disclosure, in regard to some overseas travel that she took to Italy last year, there's no mention of her spouse's supposed spouse's financial holdings. And I find this so interesting because AOC has been such a stickler with congressional ethics, and she's benefited from this boyfriend loophole in congressional financial disclosure laws. That since she's not legally married, as her office claims, to Riley Roberts, her long-term partner, even though they live together and they spend every morning together, they spend quality time together, they presumably share expenses, household expenses. His finances are shielded from the public, unlike every other congressional spouse that has to disclose their finances.
So she keeps telling everybody, she keeps saying in all sorts of forms, he's my spouse, he's my spouse, he's my spouse. But on actual financial disclosures, She doesn't reveal anything about his finances, even though she's obligated to. And now her argument is what? That they're not actually married?
Right. So I sent her office a bunch of questions, and the only one they answered, the office got back to me and said that, they're not legally married, and they added that House ethics has commonly recognized the term spouse to extend to long-term partners. The only problem here is there's two problems. One, that's false. House ethics is very clear that it considers spouse to be, quote, someone to whom you're legally married. And the second problem is that AOC is kind of caught in a bind here. She is claiming, for the purposes of disclosing overseas travel, that Riley Roberts is her spouse. But in terms of financial disclosure, he's apparently not a spouse, and so she gets to keep hiding his finances from the public.
Well, that's interesting because if our audience recalls, this guy Riley Roberts is not only her longtime partner or fiance or spouse or whatever he is. He's also been a campaign worker for her. She was paying him extensively out of campaign funds.
Yeah, so one of the PACs that supported her, I believe it was Brand New Congress, paid him about $6,000 worth of, and that PAC helped her ascension in 2018. And he's also provided some in-kind services to AOC's campaign. But yeah, I mean, he works in the tech industry. He's a web developer. He presumably makes decent money. We're talking about a member of Congress that's established herself as this champion of good governments and ethics and government. AOC makes this big show about how she says, I don't own stocks or cryptocurrency, and so that she can do her job as ethically and impartially as she can. But I've asked her office several times since they got engaged last May, well, what about Riley Roberts? He lives with you. You share expenses with him. You spend every morning with him, according to Riley Roberts said. Does he own stocks or crypto? And they won't answer. And so it's very interesting to me that now there's this confusion in regards to whether he's a spouse or not, and whether his finances are now subject to public disclosure.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I want to mention.
Go ahead.
Is that AOC introduced a bill a few months ago that would prohibit members of Congress and their spouses from owning or trading any sort of stocks or cryptocurrencies or any sort of financial instrument. And the nifty thing here is that law would not apply to AOC's fiance if they remain unmarried. And that's a massive loophole that she has no interest in closing. And so it really is an important thing whether, are you two married? And even if they're not, ethics experts are telling me, they're calling on her to, hey, put your money where your mouth is. You're attacking Clarence Thomas for his alleged ethical transgressions, but here you are. We have, one half of your household finances are being shielded from the public.
Yes.
Just go ahead and disclose them. And she's effectively stonewalling. It's just not really answering any questions about this. So, it's a bizarre story.
It is super bizarre. And by the way, she does claim to be Catholic. She has previously said that her Catholicism has led to her positions on things like healthcare and the environment. Apparently, it hasn't led to her position on living in sin. She's living. It's not actually her husband. But you had to ask her office, and they had to tell you they're not actually married.
Right, which conflicts with what she's saying on these forms, which are there's a big red notice that says willful or knowing misrepresentations on this form may subject you to criminal prosecution. So there appears to be reason for AOC to be very honest in these forms.
Sure.
Right under that notice, she's checking the box that this guy is her spouse.
Yes. So she's and this is so crazy and so typical for her. But she appears to be lying about her marriage and appears to be committing a crime. Based on everything you found, she appears to have committed a crime here, Andrew Kerr, and is not revealing the finances because they would either expose one of two things. This is my hunch. Either she's on the take, they're pilfering campaign funds or something and paying them out to themselves, or she would be exposed as a phony because he's tied up in all sorts of corporate interests that would embarrass her if it got out. It's like, the socialist is like fully invested in Microsoft or Walmart or Apple or whatever. It's remarkable. Andrew Kerr.
Right. Right.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for your excellent reporting on all of these subjects and all of our conversations. Thank you, Andrew Kerr. All right, the president just wrapped up speaking. I'm told it was at PG County Community College. And as he was walking away from the stage, he was the whole event was to talk about how great the economy is. They should hand out glasses of water to the audience so they can do spit takes. Everyone can just, are you serious? At the end of this, he's walking away from the stage, and some reporters, start yelling to him about whether or not he has any reaction to the indictment of his dear boy.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
What is this music? Can you listen to this? Did you hear this, Corey? I don't know if Corey heard the clip before we're playing it. I'm just hearing it for the first time. They've got this like crazy music bed underneath it. I guess they were playing inside the room.
Mr. President, you have a platform full of reporters.
You know, it's funny. This is one of the rare times where I'm not surprised Biden didn't hear them. I can barely hear the question over this audio. Biden doesn't acknowledge them. That's not that surprising. You can't hear a damn thing. So the woman seems to be saying, you've got a platform full of reporters. Do you have any message to your son today? I don't know what the point of that question is. Yeah, I mean, Biden could easily swat that. Yeah, I've got a message. I call him and I tell him my message. I'm not going to tell you. What am I going to communicate through you? No. This Biden thing is wild. We're going to keep on this. I know we've got some calls standing by. I want to try and get to them soon here. We've also got Russ Vought. He's going to join us coming up because a very interesting civil war going on inside the Republican conference right now. Yes, Kevin McCarthy has launched the impeachment inquiry, but Matt Gaetz is throwing tomatoes at the stage. He's not impressed at all. It's led to a bunch of F-bombs being dropped this morning behind closed doors. What it all means, Russ Vought will help us sort it out just moments from now. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 now, WMAL. Or we're making sense of the news. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Some drama in the Republican conference this week, now spilling out into public, over the issue of this impeachment against Joe Biden. Republicans everywhere have long thought that Joe Biden needs to be impeached for any number of very good reasons. And finally this week, you do get an impeachment inquiry announced by Kevin McCarthy. That's great. But then you have some interesting objection being raised by Congressman Matt Gaetz, a man who does support impeachment but thinks that there may be a distraction afoot. Take a listen to him.
On this very floor in January, the whole world witnessed a historic contest for House Speaker. I rise today to serve notice. Mr. Speaker, you are out of compliance with the agreement that allowed you to assume this role. The path forward for the House of Representatives is to either bring you into immediate total compliance or remove you pursuant to a motion to vacate the chair.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz going after him, and this morning you get NBC reporting that frustration has boiled over in a closed-door House Republican meeting this morning when Speaker Kevin McCarthy all but dared his detractors to file that motion to vacate the Speaker's chair and try and remove him. In the meeting, McCarthy telling House Republicans, if you want to file a motion to vacate, then file the effing motion, according to two sources in the room who confirmed the comments. They say it was a nod to members, including Congressman Matt Gaetz and others, who are threatening to force him out of the speakership if he doesn't comply with their demands, like putting certain bills on the floor and not passing a stopgap bill to prevent a government shutdown at the end of the month. For more on this, let's bring in Russ Vought. He's the president for the Center for Renewing America and a former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Donald Trump. Russ, great to have you back with us, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Vic.
This spending battle that's happening right now and impeachment, the impeachment inquiry, how do the two things relate to one another?
Well, I mean, in general, the Speaker has been out of compliance with the agreement that he made with conservatives to become Speaker. And that had to do on one front with the accountability towards the Biden administration, impeaching Biden, Mayorkas, Garland, using that tool that is clearly there and ready to be used. At the same time, he's tried to move, past the terrible debt limit deal that set us back financially. And instead of trying to recover from that and find common ground with conservatives about ways to move forward, he hasn't done that either. And so he's just put them on a hamster wheel where, he's tried to distract them from the fight. It hasn't worked. And now two things are coming to a head on a government shutdown. And I think folks are saying, look, you're either going to really try to impeach Biden and not just pass this along. And remember, just to be clear, McCarthy didn't do that this week until the speech from Gates was noticed on the floor. So that was a change of his own policy in recognition of the gathering storm from conservatives. And then you have the funding fight that is coming because we have a deadline at the end of September. And I think these things are coming to the head. And I don't think Kevin McCarthy is going to survive at all unless he agrees to fight the Biden administration with all he's got.
So as a condition of his speakership, he promised conservatives in the House that he would shepherd the passage of 12 clean spending bills. As the congressional calendar looks right now, there is no chance that occurs by the end of the month, is there?
Well, what he agreed to was to be at a pre-COVID spending level and be at regular order. Now, regular order is essentially an effort to be able to pass bills on the floor. He's wasted 8 months, 7 months, 6 months, whatever it is. He's wasted that time. The real key condition, though, is to be at a level that would cause you to cut the woke and weaponized bureaucracy that Biden has ramped up and is the thing that is starving the American people of border security, energy security, is dealing with the prosecutions against an entire half of the country. And that is where I really believe the fight is, Vince, is that they have to use this. This is maybe the only leverage point we have for the next year.
Totally.
They have to use this to be able to defund the bureaucracy in the Biden administration that is at the throats of the American people.
Yeah, I mean, where are the Republicans? We get some of them on the show, and they seem to agree with it, but I don't hear a lot of volume all over the place on defunding things like Alejandro Mayorkas, defunding all of these ridiculous special counsels, defunding political prosecutions, defunding the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, defunding the D.C. District Court, defunding all of the out-of-control components of our government that deserve it.
It's because for too long we've had in Washington, D.C., Republicans who are cartel politicians. They intentionally try to not accomplish their policy objectives in order to preserve political stability. And doing that, instead of you and I focusing on where the actual leverage points and them doing it, what they do is they find other things to be talking about, hearings, whatever, and they never want to go for the jugular about where they can actually do a lot of good for the country, and that is defunding the woke and weaponized bureaucracy. And thankfully, there's 20 members of the House Freedom Caucus and potentially more. They're going to insist on that in this upcoming next 3 weeks.
Well, now, I don't know about you, but I personally want to see all of this happen right now. I want to see them meet their spending obligations to the country and cut this, as you mentioned, kind of the woke and out-of-control abusive bureaucracy in the federal government, and simultaneously undertake an impeachment proceeding against Biden that digs up every last piece of dirt and airs it out for the American public. They can do both, right?
They can, and I think that's the point that Matt is making, is that don't let Kevin McCarthy do this slow-mo impeachment resolution investigation that is nothing more than an effort to distract on both fronts when the American people expect, and there is no reason why he can't do both. And I think that's what folks are ensuring is not happen, that impeachment doesn't become a shiny object. It's important. It needs to be done. And the spending fight as well needs to be prosecuted well.
Now, I do have to ask, do you think, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but one of the things I'm concerned about is by simply announcing the impeachment inquiry, that the House Republicans may not have the powers that they claim they get from undertaking an impeachment unless they actually vote for it, right? There's no floor vote on this subject. The argument that Kevin McCarthy's been making over and over and over again is, well, this will give us the apex of investigative power. Nobody will be able to stop our subpoenas now. Is that true?
Well, I'd refer to them in terms of the arguments that they make procedurally. I know that was a key thing that we made in terms of when we were in the midst of the impeachment. But I think the reality is, does the executive branch feel like they need to participate in the proceedings because it is a serious endeavor? And we certainly didn't think it was a serious endeavor. We thought it was a trumped-up charge. I think the record here is so much greater. And I think if you're combining it, and this is what I'd love to see, Vince, is I'd love for them to actually combine their accountability and their subpoena power with their funding power of the purse, so that we don't even have a debate about whether the agency would respond or not, that we would actually have a debate that they would have to come forward because they knew that they would be on the hook for losing all of their funding.
And in the case of, say, the Justice Department, they have officials who are implicated into the very things that are bringing Biden up for impeachment. So if you have an investigation into the Biden family's finances that has been routinely stymied, in the words of whistleblowers, by government officials, that is a perfect target for both a Biden impeachment and government defunding, correct?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, that's exactly the way they need to be thinking about this, is that your appropriators and your weaponization committee individuals and your impeachment committee individuals need to be all in the same room with a comprehensive strategy.
I mean, how aggressive should these Republicans get, and how different would Congress need to look in order to get there? Because it does feel like there's really only a handful of people who are willing to say all of this out loud. We need to really gut the government right now because of its abuses.
Well, I mean, in general, I think we have a problem not necessarily with the way that Congress is organized, but the fact that most members have no idea on the Republican side what time it is in the country, and it's late. And I think you and I would say it's close to 11:59. Most Republican members would think it's about 3 p.m. And I think that's the problem, is that they are just captured by the framing of the liberal media. And so they don't actually devise strategies based on what's necessary to save the country.
Yes.
They devise strategies to make themselves feel safe and to be accepted in this town, and that's not going to get it done. And I think that's what we need to change. And hopefully this fight over the speakership is one of those leverage points to change that perception.
Do they respond, Russ Vought, to pressure from the base? If enough conservatives across the country begin placing pressure on these members, do they take it seriously?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there is great ability for the conservative movement, the grassroots movement across the country to bust through the cartel when it's very clear that their members are not aligning with their interest. And the duty for those of us like you and I is to expose the extent to which the games are being played, the shiny objects. Once those things get exposed, and we have enough people inside D.C., inside the Congress, like a Chip Roy or a Bob Good, a Dan Bishop. When you have those cartel busters, that all that you need is the grassroots to come along behind them and get their back. And I think that's what you're seeing. I mean, Matt Gaetz takes to the floor couple of days before. He had said, you know what, I appreciate all of those who were asking me to do more, and I took those to heart. And next thing you know, he's going down unilaterally and taking action. That's what happens when people across the country are involved in the political process, encouraging those who are already leading, and for those who are not leading, getting them as much accountability as they possibly can.
Yeah, and apparently in the Republican meeting this morning, Kevin McCarthy was indicating that it would be a loser for Republicans to allow the government to shut down. So basically, because the Republicans would be blamed for a government shutdown, and he pointed to the fact that you'd have World War II veterans being flown in on these honor flights, and the Biden administration, just like Obama, would take bike barriers and wall off the World War II memorial to stop these great American vets from getting there, saying, well, you can't because the Republicans shut down the government. The feeling among establishment Republicans in Washington right now is if there is a government shutdown, they will be blamed and it's going to hurt them.
Yeah, they live in night terrors with regard to any sorts of shutdowns, and they're always wrong politically. When I was at OMB, my job during the last shutdown was to keep the government open as much as possible, consistent with the law. And of course, I'm not there now. Donald Trump's not in office. But their ability to artificially and politically shut things down is so much more limited now because we have something to judge them on about how things could be if they were willing to. That said, in addition, at any moment, if there's some issue with the national parks, they can put a bill on the floor that says we're going to open up the national parks and make the Democrats oppose it. There's countless ways to navigate and execute through a political fight like this. What is necessary is the willing to actually have the confrontation and to be able to tack through the wind to get to where you're going. And that's what McCarthy and the establishment has been unwilling to do. And then once they are willing to, once we're in that, I think there's a lot of ways to manage the political risk and to ensure that the Biden administration owns it for the fact that they caused it.
Yeah, it's amazing what we're entering into. Russ Vought, thank you for helping us keep our eyes on what the government's really up to here, including Republicans in Congress. Really appreciate your time as always, President for Center for Renewing America and a former OMB director under President Trump. Thank you, Russ. You know, Joe Biden obviously needs to go, and he's going to go one way or the other. The Democrats are going to throw him out. He'll lose the next election. Somehow he's going to leave office. But the replacements, you know, it looks like it's Donald Trump at this point, given all the polling. But all of these Republican candidates in their own way have me face-palming in the last 24 hours. And it just drives me nuts. I realize nobody's ever going to be perfect for me. Nobody's ever going to be perfect. I'm sure it's that way for you. But listen, you know, Trump sat down with Megyn Kelly and did her show. And he said he doesn't know who gave Fauci a presidential commendation medal. It's called a presidential commendation medal. I mean, even if somebody else came up with it, you signed off on it.
For years, you've been saying that the reason you didn't fire Anthony Fauci was because he'd been there for a long time, that you would have taken heat, that it would have created a firestorm, quoting your words. Then for the first time in May...
I also said I didn't listen to him too much.
I'm getting there. But then in May, you started saying, well, he's a civil servant, so I couldn't technically. The truth is, though, not only did you not fire Fauci, who is loathed by many, millions of Republicans in particular, but also some Democrats.
By the way...
You made him a star. You made him a star. This is the criticism of you, that you made him the face of the White House coronavirus task
You think so?
force, that he was out at every presser, that he was running herd for the administration on COVID, and that you actually gave him a presidential commendation before he left office. Wouldn't you like a do-over on that?
I don't know who gave him the commendation. I really don't know who gave him the commendation.
Presidential commendation. One went out to Mark
Somebody
Milley, too.
probably handed him a commendation. He probably...
And actually, the commendation, it wasn't like it was early in the pandemic. This was the very last day of Trump's presidency, January 19th, the last full day of his presidency. He gave Mark Milley, Alex Azar, Jared Kushner, Deborah Birx, Anthony Fauci, all these presidential commendations. I mean, obviously somebody drafted a list in his office, but it's Trump's name on it. You've got to own that, dude. You gave the guy a commendation in your last day in office. Meanwhile, as far as DeSantis is concerned, he just did an interview with CBS, and he mostly sounded great. He was with Norah O'Donnell, but he did have one moment in this interview that had me going, what is he doing?
The idea that a teacher would say, yes, you can change, and there's some schools around the country where they say it's okay to transition a kid without the parent's consent or knowledge.
Agreed.
And as a parent, that is just unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
I mean, schools serve an important function, but to be intruding into a family matter like that, I think goes beyond what is appropriate. And here's the thing.
Totally.
Are we doing so well as a country on math scores and reading scores and science? Why don't we focus on those things?
Amen.
You know, that I think unites everybody regardless of their viewpoint. And I'm not saying be negative about, the gender identity stuff. I'm just saying I don't think it's appropriate to have in there at all.
What is that? I'm not saying be negative on the gender identity stuff. Hey, if you want to pretend that you're a completely different gender, it's fine. What? What is that position? Why do you were so strong throughout the rest of that answer. And then you come along with, but yeah, you could pretend to be a girl if you want to. It's like, what? What is that answer? Why do you have to pay a little lip service to the New York Times in these answers? People, they all kind of drive me crazy in their own way. Last one for you today, for the people who are driving me crazy today. Vivek Ramaswamy, the guy who was so good on TikTok and how it's controlled by China, now says he's joining TikTok because that's where the kids are. He acknowledges, yes, the Chinese control it, but it's no different than these American tech companies who turn over data to China. It has me hitting my head. Don't support the Communist Party's tech platform. What are you doing? I like all of these guys. Almost all of what they say, actually. And my quibbles, I just laid them out. It's 4:58.